This video is not to try to prove why or why not this release should or should not be used for hunting. I'm just going to talk about my personal use with multiple different release styles for hunting and what I've found works best for me over the years. So I started shooting a bow back in 2010, and like most beginning archers, I was handed a index style wrist strap release. I didn't really know anything else existed for the first couple of years of shooting. I just went through the normal process that most beginning archers do of commanding the shot. They're told to hold the pin on the target, and whenever the pin's there, pull that trigger and the arrow's gonna go there. And that's what I was told, and that's what I did for so many years, and I didn't know it any other way. And for the most part, it worked pretty good for me. I started to harvest some animals and was making good shots, but the more I hunted and the more intense situations I got myself in with a big deer in front of me that I'd been after for a long time, I wasn't really making a quality shot every single time. My focus wasn't exactly where it needed to be. Kind of roughly put my pins kind of where they needed to be, and I would just let it rip and made really good shots, and I never really wounded anything, never really missed any animals doing that. So I was getting positive feedback. The biggest thing that I did not like about my shot sequence when hunting was rushing the shot. As soon as that pin or that part of the sight housing was on that animal, man, that arrow was gone. I would just let it go. There was no conscious execution of the release and execution of putting that pin exactly where it needed to be. I noticed more and more on the range, behold low and pull up and let it rip, jerk a little bit. I was shooting really good groups doing that sort of thing, which again, it was giving me positive feedback. So I really didn't know there was a huge issue. It was kind of more stressful than anything, but it wasn't very fun shooting a bow. So the years go by. At this point, I'm 10 years into archery. It's 2020. I was killing animals with what I was using, so I didn't think there was a better way really, until a turkey hunt that Josh and I did in western Nebraska in 2020. We found this bird and we ended up going down in this really cool little creek bottom, kind of a coulee down there, built this super awesome blind, put the decoys out in front, and sure enough, this tom comes straight in. And I was watching this animal just a little bit too much. He was just so pretty, this beautiful Miriam's in the decoys. I just wanted to get a little bit of cool footage more than anything, so I didn't take the first shot, and that was a huge mistake. 45 seconds, maybe a minute or so into this bird kind of interacting with the decoys, I decided to take the shot. I missed him. I completely missed the bird, and I didn't really realize what happened until we looked back on the footage. I punched that trigger so bad, and you can see it on my face. I think I killed the animal. I'm excited because I got a Miriam's in the bag, and then the instant disappointment of the miss. Not only embarrassing for me because I should have shot him sooner and I should have made a better shot on such an easy shot. It was kind of a downer because we traveled 9 hours to get to this spot out west, found this area and found these birds and made this blind and the whole thing, and then I just totally screwed it up. And it was at that point, I probably hit one of the lowest moments as a bow hunter, and I just completely screwed up the whole thing by yanking that trigger and making a bad shot and missing the animal completely. For weeks after that, maybe even months, I was just kind of sick to my stomach about this can't be the right way to do it. There has to be a better way than just punching that trigger and target panic and letting it rip and missing an animal. It was pretty heartbreaking. It was more than just missing an animal. Josh keeps telling me to, maybe try a different release. Try going through a process to get rid of this target panic and get rid of all these bad habits that I've built up over the years. So he lets me use one of his resistance releases. It was a stand. So a resistance release, tension release, those are the same things. The term back tension release isn't necessarily a thing. Back tension is more the style that's used, the motion that's used to execute a release. And you can use back tension whether you're using an index or a hinge or a tension release. I was all in on it, and I fully committed to the process on how to properly execute with a resistance release and kind of get rid of that target panic and get rid of all those bad habits. I went through this process. This would have been June at this point. I completely didn't do anything but shot indoor at super close ranges, going through the process. And I'm not going to talk about the whole thing now, but we do have a video on that entire process that I went through to learn the resistance release and help me out a lot with target panic. We have that video on the the channel if you want to watch that. But I went through that entire process and that entire video for about a month and a half. It's extremely crucial to learn that resistance release the right way and go slow and steady. And if there's any time whatsoever that a mistake is made, as I just restarted at the very beginning, went back to blank bailing at just a couple feet until I really got the feel for that. Got a lot of confidence in it, built a ton of confidence in it. We went out to Total Archery Challenge and I shot all of that whole course, that whole weekend with the resistance release, and it felt absolutely phenomenal. It was like a new way to shoot. Well, now with the resistance release, I found that I can really fine tune exactly where I want to aim and put that pin exactly, I mean exactly on the feather, on the piece of the fur or whatever it is of that animal, and work on the execution of that release and just make a lot better, cleaner shots on targets and on animals with it. We were going elk hunting that fall and I was just pumped to use the resistance release going into elk season in September. There were some malfunctions within the release. I wasn't super confident with it, so I ended up sending that one back in to get fixed, and that happened to be right at the end of August, early September, right when I was about to go elk hunting. So Josh had this thumb release, pretty much the exact same design as the resistance release, so he taught me how to shoot that with back tension, with proper execution. Ended up missing a nice antelope with it in the end of August, and it was a super rush situation. These 6 big bucks came in running to our decoy at last light. It was the only one I had, so I kept using it going into elk season as well. So I elk hunted for a long time. You may have seen that video on the channel, and toward the end of the hunt, I finally got an opportunity at a bull in Colorado, and Josh called him in. He bugled him in, came right up to about 40 yards, had this limb right in front of me, ended up kind of leaning forward just a little bit to try to get out of the way of this limb, let the shot go, and I still hit that limb and missed that bull. Again, another miss. When I think back on it, you know, I don't know if I necessarily punched the trigger on that one, but I definitely probably let it go a lot sooner than I would have or than I should have. And I know if I had a resistance release in that situation, it would have slowed me down enough to realize that that limb's still in the way, and you know, made me more conscious of what's going on, where the pin is exactly, where that limb was exactly too. But since I didn't have that, I still rushed the shot more than I should have, probably punched it just a little bit and let that thing go, and arrow sailed right over the top of that bull's back. So now I've experienced multiple misses with another trigger style release. I just wasn't having it. But at the end of that hunt, Josh pulled out his old hinge release that he had used when he was younger. It was a pretty cheap hinge release, but he said, you know, this is gonna be a better suit for you. Thumb or an index wasn't gonna work for me. The resistance release was not back from the factory getting fixed yet. He taught me how to shoot the hinge release in the mountains of Colorado just as we were about to leave. Taught me how to shoot that release, and it felt amazing. Once again, just like the resistance release, I was super, super confident in it. Shooting that hinge release, it was the first time I'd ever shot a hinge in my life, and Josh did a really good job teaching me, so I was going to use that the rest of the fall. So leading into the end of October, I was back home in Nebraska whitetail hunting, and I had an opportunity at an awesome buck at about 22 yards, and that was going to be my first shot on an animal with that release. Executed perfectly, and it felt absolutely amazing, and I was hooked. Made a perfect shot, and even more important than that, I had full conscious of my execution on the release, as well as exactly where the pin was on that animal. A couple weeks after that, I was in Kansas on a mule deer hunt and made probably my best shot to date at 60 yards on an awesome mule deer buck, and again with that same pretty cheap hinge release, but it just felt so awesome for me. And after that, Josh and I went out west, harvested a doe antelope with that release, and then harvested a doe later on. The execution just felt amazing, and I had a ton of confidence in it. I kept using the hinge style release and ended up getting a little bit higher quality one. Shot that really well, ended up shooting a turkey in Wyoming with that in spring of 21, and then in the fall of 21 shot an antelope in Nebraska with that as well, and shots were still feeling really good. Next spring of 22, harvested an Iowa turkey with that release. Shot felt amazing, but at that time, you know, I had that resistance release back. It was totally fixed and it was working phenomenal. So I decided to go back to the resistance release summer of 22, and I shot that thing a ton and built a ton of confidence with it again. Shot Total Archery Challenge with it. Was feeling super, super confident in it again and ready for the fall. So that's exactly what I was going to use. First hunt of fall 2022. Wyoming elk hunt. On that hunt, I had probably the coolest encounter of all time that I've ever experienced. That full video is on the channel if you want to check it out. But man, I had this incredible bull coming in, and oh man, it was just amazing. But long story short, broadside at 60 yards, and I was super confident at that distance. I had the resistance release, like I said. When I made that 60-yard shot on that huge bull, I had more confidence in that shot than any other shot ever. It was, I can't really explain it. Man, when that shot broke and I was shaking probably worse than I've ever shook on an animal. I had to draw down. I was drawing back for like a minute, and I had to draw down and then draw back again and make the shot. And you know, it was later on in the hunt, so I was pretty worn down. My muscles were worn down. I was tired. And when that shot went, that execution, I mean, I just can't express how amazing it felt. It just felt like the natural way that I'm supposed to shoot a bow is with that resistance release. And that's how it personally felt for me in that arrow hit. And you know, it was a high pressure situation, big old bull, 60 yards broadside. I need to make it happen. But yet at the same time, I still had that confidence in that execution, and then also putting my pin exactly where I needed to be instead of just floating that housing, you know, somewhere around the body. I had the pin exactly where I wanted it to be, and I had the execution. It just felt amazing. I can't really, you know, describe it any other way. It's not for everybody, but man, that moment was my first animal with the resistance release, and it just felt so right. From then on, I kept using it all of last fall. I ended up harvesting 5 does utilizing that release in Iowa, and every single shot just felt absolutely amazing and really made me focus on the conscious effort of putting that pin where it needed to be and executing that release properly instead of just putting the sight housing there and yanking it. And then I also harvested a really nice buck here in Iowa as well. Same thing, pressured situation. Exactly when that pin was there, I was totally focused, put that pin exactly where it needed to be, execute perfectly, and it just felt amazing. So that's 7 animals now that I'd harvested with that release. And I know it's not for everybody, and some people may not prefer that, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. It's just what I found to work really well for me, to keep me focused in the moment of truth and really help me execute that shot properly instead of just kind of winging it, putting my sight roughly close, pulling the trigger, and hope it hits good. Now, I don't plan to use the resistance release for the rest of my life for hunting. I love shooting a hinge as well. At this current time, I can't shoot anything with the trigger. It just doesn't work for me personally. It can work great for other guys, and that's amazing. But me personally, I just can't shoot anything with the trigger because I know I'm gonna punch it in the moment of truth. So a hinge and a resistance is all I really plan on shooting for quite a while now. A couple issues that I do have. The biggest one is the difference in shooting at a target and shooting at an animal with this release. Because of the adrenaline rush, it goes a lot quicker in a hunting situation, I found. So what I need to do is set it a couple pounds heavier for hunting, so then it kind of evens out to where it is when I'm usually on the range target practicing, where it's not going too fast but also not taking forever either. So it takes somewhere in that 3 to 5, 6 second range, something like that, which I like for a hunting situation. With that being set heavy for hunting, the problem with that is when I'm practicing during hunting season, I don't want to make it lighter and then keep going back and forth. So I keep it heavy, and I can't get very many shots off when I'm practicing because my muscles will just wear down. It's just too heavy for me when I don't have that adrenaline rush from a close encounter at a big deer or something like that. So I can't go out and shoot 50, 60 arrows during hunting season. I can shoot probably 15 to 20 before I start getting worn down pretty good. So I guess that's just something I need to focus on, shooting 10 to 15 good solid arrows per day. There are a lot of pros and cons to using a resistance or tension style release for hunting, but like I just described, for me personally, it seems to be working really well. And what really set me up for the foundation of that is going through that process video and just fine-tuning every single detail before moving on, and just giving myself plenty of time with no rush or no constraints to really learning the execution of that properly and make sure I instilled proper habits. Josh is a really great teacher of this, and he loves helping anybody out that has any issues with anything archery, but especially release or target panic related. So feel free to sign up through the link in the video description for some resources on how to help overcome target panic. Shoot us a DM or something, we can help you out if you have any problems like that, or comment on this video if you want to learn more about it, because spring of 2020 I was kind of a mess, and I'm so glad Josh was there to teach me how to shoot these different style releases and pretty much change the way I shoot and my enjoyment of archery, enjoyment of hunting and success hunting, and it's just been a really fun journey. This is why I've personally found a resistance release to work really well for hunting. By no means is this a video to tell you that you should be using a resistance or a hinge or anything like that. No one release is perfect for every scenario. The resistance and the hinge as well are some that I found helped me out big time, grow as an archer more in this past couple years than the first 10 years of archery combined. I really hope this video has helped somebody out there if you're struggling with the dip bangs or not trusting your pin float or rushing shots on animals or something like that. Maybe consider trying out a different style release and really working through it and learning it properly. Hopefully this video helped you, and if it did, like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below if you have any questions for me about this. I love talking about this and helping people in situations that I was in just a couple years ago struggling with it. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for some upcoming fall hunts and a bunch of other videos that we have planned for the rest of this year. It's going to be an awesome fall. We're super excited.